Right. Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for this edition of the online Mulesoft meetup. Very happy to have Nick Bowman and Sriraj Avnagot joining us today to talk about robotic process automation, APIs, and Mulesoft. So hopefully there'll be a lot. It'd be amazing if you could introduce yourself in the chat. Feel free to use that throughout the meetup. If you do have questions, I will be pasting a link in the chat where you can submit your questions as well. I am Royston Lobo. I'm one of the leaders of this meetup group. I will be moderating the questions towards the end of this session. So feel free to post your questions. All right, with that, Nick, if you could take away and please introduce yourself, and we look forward to hearing what you have.
Thank you very much, Royston. Well, firstly, thank you very much for the opportunity to discuss what is a very interesting topic, and welcome everybody who's joining locally and globally. So that's very exciting. So my name is Nick Bowman. I work for Capgemini as a Mulesoft delivery practice lead out of Melbourne, Australia. And I'm joined by Sriraj, who will be doing the technical segment or demonstration of Mulesoft and Automation Anywhere working together. So I guess just to, I wanted to, but before I go into a definition, high-level definition of what RPA is, I did want to step back a few years and talk about my experience with RPA. And a number of years ago, I was working with a tier 1 bank on a loan origination project. So this is using a BPM process automation suite with workflow. And while we achieved our goals of reducing the time to yes for a bank to approve a loan, there were a lot of human workflow steps across the way, and we did a lot of automated integration, but there were a lot of human workflow steps, and a lot of those tasks were people interacting with legacy banking applications that could otherwise have been and would take a fair amount of time still to interact with. And at the time, we had technologies such as OCR and screen scraping or UI interrogation technologies. And I thought to myself, well, there must be a better way of doing this. And upon further research, came across some tools such as OpenSpan, UiPath, Automation Anywhere, and Blue Prism, which were still fairly new and in their infancy. But this term robotic process automation came up that I became very excited about. And the RPA as a concept and these tools have really evolved over the years. So I might start there and explain a bit about just what RPA is, and its benefits, and we'll go on to explain how RPA can work best with Mulesoft. So let's start off with a bit of a definition of what RPA does, and we're referring to software that can be easily programmed to perform tasks across applications, just as people or knowledge workers can do. So we're not talking about physical robots or agents working in a warehouse or anything physical, but we're talking about agents that are running on either a desktop machine or a virtual machine, and they're typically carrying out tasks that humans would in the real world on their desktop. So RPA designers write process automation scripts for their bots to carry out. And they determine how best to interact with target applications on the desktop. So we might be looking at technologies like optical character recognition, screen scraping or UI interrogation techniques. And we might be looking at things like interacting with desktop applications or email. And with probably the latest innovation with RPA tools is things like artificial intelligence capabilities. So, for example, Automation Anywhere has the concept of the UI bot, which can learn and intelligently perform tasks. The third component to call out is the concept of a control room. So this is typically via a web interface where the various RPA personas can design, deploy, and manage bots. Okay. So if you want to learn a bit more, and I'm just conscious that many of our participants here may already know a bit about RPA, but if you don't, there's some really good articles that Mulesoft have put out to dive a little bit deeper into RPA, talk about some of the exciting new partnerships they have with the likes of Blue Prism and Automation Anywhere, and talk through how RPA is important for our citizen integrators. So let's quickly look at an example where we could apply RPA. So I'll take the example of a bank attendant who needs to order cash each day. So for banks, this is a process that'll happen thousands of times each day and is very manually quite intensive. So at the end of each day, a staff member may log into a banking system like an AS400 green screen. They'll capture cash balances. They might log into another system, another cash ordering system. They need to apply some manual calculations to figure out the amount of cash that they want. Then they have to go to another web-based applications to fulfill their orders, and then they need to do some confirmation there. So, good example where if we think about this happening thousands of times over days and weeks, where a task that could be taking someone 15 minutes, half an hour each day, what if we had bots who could carry out this task? And think about all of that combined time and effort that we could save our frontline banking staff, and they could be focused on adding further value. So just an example to think about here where an RPA bot might add value. Then I wanted to talk briefly around some of the patterns or interactions between Mulesoft APIs and RPA. So the first one that comes to mind is Mule APIs that trigger bots. And we could think of this as a much like a system API interaction. Some care should be taken with this pattern to, ensure that we can carry out the expected throughput and transaction volume here, but it's something to consider. The second pattern we can think about is where a bot can call a Mule API. So if we look at the cash order example there, we might have a bot that's orchestrating our cash order, but some of those system API interaction points or end applications may be exposed via a Mule API. And then the third pattern that we can think about is where we have attended bots that are orchestrated by human workflows. So this is a really exciting pattern if we think about the citizen integrator. So if you're someone who's using and orchestrating bots, and you're also aware of APIs that are available for consumption here. This is where it's really important to think about Mulesoft and capabilities like Community Manager and Exchange. So that your Mulesoft APIs are there and available to your citizen integrators who have their bots, who are using these bots and need to understand what APIs they have available. So here's a nice visual which talks about what we're all familiar with in the Mulesoft three-tier architecture and how we might apply bots to that. So we can see in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, we've got a couple of system APIs where we have bots set up as effectively that system connector through to, at one point, a COBOL screen or an AS400 backend. And then we have another system API example where we're connecting through to documents. So again, a bit of care might be needs to be taken around concerns like throughput and transaction volume, but something to think about. And at a point in time, say the PDF files, for example, they might be replaced, repository, that might be replaced by a modern, content management application where you can swap out that bot for a Mulesoft system API. So I'm going to pass you across to Sriraj, who's going to be providing a live demo using the Automation Anywhere suite, and will introduce the new Automation Anywhere connector for Mulesoft. So Sriraj, I'm going to hand it over to you, buddy.
Thanks a lot for that, Nick. Good day, everyone who are all joined. To introduce myself, I'm Sriraj. I also work with Capgemini in the Mulesoft practice area out of Melbourne, Australia. Let me share my screen. Yep. So what you currently see in this screen is the Automation Anywhere control room, which is the single window for all Automation Anywhere related actions, right from administration to bot creation and execution. For the purpose of the demo, I'm using Automation Anywhere Enterprise A2019, which is the latest version of the product. I'm logging in as the admin user. So this is the landing page of Automation Anywhere dashboard, and when we go to administration and users, you can actually see 4 categories of user being created here. Admin, as the name itself suggests, is the administrator user, which is responsible for all administration related tasks, right from creating users, controlling bots, scheduling bots, and all these things. And next we have a creator, and we have a bot creator license associated to it. And this also, as the name suggests, is the creator of bots, or in other words, we can say they are the bot designers or bot developers who will be logging into the control room to create bots. And then we have runners. They are actually users responsible for executing the bot created by creators. We can have 2 different classes of runners. They are unattended bot runner and attended bot runner. And how they are differentiated is like a system user and a human user. A system user is nothing but unattended bot runner, which executes bot in the background. And then I have created one more generic user called Mulesoft, which does not have any license associated to it. And I'm going to use this just for only for the API calls from Mulesoft. So this is about the users in Automation Anywhere. Now we'll go to devices. So devices is the place where we register the target system on which our bot is going to execute. So here I've used my laptop as my target device, but in ideal scenario, it will be a high performing server, which will be 16 core or a higher performing machine on which the bot will be running. Now going to bots, this is the section where all the bots live. I have already created 2 bots, a form bot and an OCR bot, which we'll explain in detail during the course of the demo. And both are created by the creator user. So this is the control room console. And now initially the Automation Anywhere and Mulesoft is integrated by means of REST APIs. So they have a set of 45 REST APIs, which includes authentication, auditing, bot deployment, everything. So if you take the example of bot deployment, first we'll go through authentication to get an access token, and then we will use the access token to call the bot deployment. So there is a multi-step process involved in REST-based integration between MuleSoft and Automation Anywhere. But last month they have come up with a connector for Automation Anywhere, which you can actually download or from the exchange by typing Automation Anywhere. This has actually simplified the way in which we integrate MuleSoft with Automation Anywhere, because it's all configurations now, and it's a single step process where once the configuration is done, the MuleSoft can easily call the bots done on Automation Anywhere. And as you can see, the Automation Anywhere connector has got three operations in it, which is run bot async, onboard result, and get bot activity. We'll go through each of them on detail. Let's see how the connector is configured. So if you go to the Automation Anywhere connector, we can see all that is required for configuring the connector is the control room URL, which is nothing but the URL of the control room on which we logged in. So it is localhost or my desktop machine name, because it is residing in my laptop itself. And we can opt for two types of authentication here. One is an API key based authentication and a username password based authentication, which is the basic authentication. So here I have chosen API based authentication, and I've given MuleSoft as a username and the API key for MuleSoft. So let's and also once the configuration is done, it's actually once we refresh the metadata, it'll automatically pull all the details related to the bot. So here you can see it already pulled all the information from the Automation Anywhere control room, and it is provided as a drop down for us. So as a developer, it becomes a lot easier for us to configure the bot and choose what bot we need to run. And the connector also provides us capability to provide input variables as defined in the bot, so we can pass parameters from our MuleSoft to the bot that we have created. So going to our scenario, this is the first scenario that we are going to discuss today, which is data synchronization. So as we all know, in a typical large organization, there will be a lot of technology is used. So here I have mentioned SAP and Salesforce, which we know already have connectors with MuleSoft, and they also have APIs through which each systems can interact with each other through MuleSoft as the middleware. But sometimes the large organization will also have some legacy systems which do not have the APIs or interface to connect with other applications. So normally what happens is a human will be doing all the data synchronization or data entry to the legacy system. It is in this kind of scenario where Automation Anywhere comes handy, where it act as a connector or a interface between the legacy system and MuleSoft. So what happens is a developer will create a bot in Automation Anywhere which does all the human interaction with the legacy system, and the MuleSoft will trigger the bot in Automation Anywhere, so it automatically does all the legacy system things on its own without a dependency on a human person. For the purpose of the demo, I'm using a Google form as the legacy system because my laptop cannot run a legacy machine on it. So this is the form that I'm going to use as a legacy system, which is nothing but two field form, which has name and email. And I have also created a bot which actually launches the Google form and then simulates few of the keystrokes based on the input parameter email and name, which is passed from MuleSoft, then fills in the form and submits the form. And in MuleSoft, I have created a Google form which has a listener, and it accepts two query parameters, name and email, and this I'm passing into the OCR form bot, which is selected here. So let's see the bot in action. I'll trigger the form bot from my browser. So I'm passing name as MuleSoft and email as muleys@email.com. And you can see the responses are 0 now because there are no entries as of now. So once I've triggered the bot, what I get back is a deployment ID, which is nothing but a unique identifier of each bot deployment. So now on the bottom right screen, you can see the Automation Anywhere is already kickstarted. So now it takes in the input that is passed from Mulesoft and automatically fills in all the details and submits the form. And now if we go back to the form, you can see one response is already registered and it says the details, whatever we have provided. So this is the form bot. And now the question arises on how we know about the success of the bot. So here we know that the action of bot deployment sends us a deployment ID as a response. And now in the Automation Anywhere connector, we have something called as a get bot activity. So in get bot activity, the only input that is required for get bot activity is the deployment ID. So what happens is when we pass the deployment ID, the Automation Anywhere will pull the status of the bot and pass back the information to us. So let's check the status of that particular deployment that we did now. So we will pass this deployment ID. So now you can see this is the response of the bot activity result, and you can see the status is completed and the progress is 100%. That means the bot run was successful, and also it matches the bot that we triggered, which is the form bot, and the device on which it ran was the desktop, which is my local machine, and all the related informations are visible. And now we go to the next scenario where Mulesoft and Automation Anywhere uses each other as utilities. As Nick already mentioned, Automation Anywhere and RPA tools have very good OCR capability. So just imagine a scenario of a driver onboarding for a product like Uber, where we need to pass our ID document like a passport or a driving license, and we also fill in our profile. So if there is a capability where we can extract the detail from the ID provided and matches with the profile, then it will be very useful in doing the or in automating the validation of the job profile. So for this example, I'm going to use this image as my sample image. This is nothing but an Australian passport sample. So you can see all the name, nationality and everything mentioned here. And I have also created a bot in Automation Anywhere called OCR Bot. So what it requires is only the input URL of the image. So once the input URL is received, it will extract all the details from the image and pass it back to Mulesoft. So here you can see I've used a REST API call from Automation Anywhere. So what this is to establish the fact that Automation Anywhere is also capable to call back or to call any SOAP or REST-based services. So it may not be for passing the information extracted, but also it can use REST or SOAP-based call to pull information from any Mulesoft services. And within Mulesoft, I have also created an OCR flow, which is listening on a listener. And here in the run bot async, I'm passing OCR bot as my bot, and the input parameter is a input URL. I'm also adding one more parameter called image ID just to store it somewhere on a object store so that I can pull back the detail later. So let me trigger the OCR bot. So again, you can see it is successfully triggered, and we can see that we get the deployment ID back. And now it has started the OCR capture. Take some time to run through and get the image details. So now it is successful, and you can see in the console that it has passed back the details: passport, Australia, name is John, citizen, and nationality is Australian, date of birth is this one. And next question is this about this operation, which is onboard result. Onboard result is the only source connector in Automation Anywhere. So you can see it is used as a source in this flow. So the main purpose of this onboard result is to let us know automatically when the bot execution is completed. So once this is used in a flow, it works in tandem with the run bot async. So you can see that my run bot async has a result key mentioned here called as result, And once that is mentioned, the onboard result should have the same result key mentioned on the bot result key. So then what happens is the onboard result connector and the bot async connector becomes a pair. So for every execution that we do on the run bot async with this particular bot key, an automatic callback happens in the onboard result. So in my console, you can see there are two logs. One is from the REST call that happened from the automation anywhere, and the second one is automated callback, and this is actually a larger set of result. So when you check the result from onboard result, you can see there is a bot output, and you can see the deployment ID, user ID, and status is already included in the result. So this is very useful in very critical integration where we are dependent on the status of the bot run so that we can mark a transaction as complete. Let me purposefully make a bot run fail so that we'll know how onboard result is very helpful. For that, I'm using the same URL, but I'll just remove the extension from it, so it will be difficult for the OCR to extract the details. I'll use the same URL, but I'll remove the JPEG extension. So now you can see it is successfully triggered, and we got a deployment ID, and it started the bot. And from here you can see it is unsuccessful, but in normal scenario the bot will be running on some servers, so we cannot know visually on what happened with the bot. So in those cases the onboard result will be very helpful. So you can see there is already a log here, and the deployment ID matches with the deployment ID what we got from the deployment, and the status here is run failed. So we are automatically informed that the execution is failed. And here there is only one log because it cannot extract the image, so the callback or the REST call from the bot did not happen, and it's only the onboard result that got executed. Just to finish the demo, I'll use one more image, which is the Mulesoft image. It's a simpler one to extract. So this is the image that I'm going to use, which is connect anything and change everything. I'll pass the URL. These both are same URLs. The only difference is it is in a URI format, because in a query parameter I want to escape all the special characters of the URL. So this is the URI format of the same URL. Let me pause it. Yep. So now the deployment is completed, and the bot execution has started. Successful, and you can see it has extracted the detail, connect anything and change everything. So same way you can use automation anywhere for multiple things. I was also playing this with my printer, because my printer is not a network printer, and I was using this to trigger a print job to my printer through Mulesoft. So it automatically started printing whatever the document that I gave. That's it from my side, and back to you, Nick.
Thanks very much, Sriraj. Very exciting. I'll just leave us with a few key points before we hand back to Royston. Let me just share my screen. Bear with me a second. Gary. So I think some key takeaways from the session. So we've spoken about a bit about conceptually and logically what RPA is, but I wanted to point to the value it brings. So we're taking the pain out of mundane and repetitive tasks. We're reducing costs, and we're reducing human error, and we're allowing, essentially we're allowing knowledge workers to better focus their efforts on growing business value by focusing more on their customers and business stakeholders, rather than doing these repetitive tasks that bots are better placed to do. The second point is that RPA and Mulesoft platforms are very much complementary. So it's really not one or the other. So again, I would invite you after session 2, have a look at some of the documentation and articles that Mulesoft have put together with with the perspective on how RPA and Mulesoft platforms can work better together, and how they can interact via APIs and the new connectors that have been released. But the third point I'd like to emphasize is ensuring that you have a clear channel of communication with your RPA and your Mulesoft C4E. So often in large organizations, you'll have a C4E for these platforms and initiatives. So it's important that the right people are talking to each other and are aware of the potential to use RPA and Mulesoft together. So have a think about how your best advertising your Mulesoft APIs via channels such as Community Manager and Exchange. So with that, Royston, I'll pass back to you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
All right, Sriraj, thank you very much for that. Had a few comments about this being a fantastic demo. We do have a few questions that have come through in the chat and Q&A link. So I'll kick off and I'll direct the questions where I think you might be able to answer them. So the first one was a fairly straightforward one, I think. So does Mulesoft have connectors, to your knowledge, to other RPA products such as UiPath and offering? Maybe Nick, you want to take that one?
Yeah, certainly. So look, Automation Anywhere is first cab off the rank, if you will, with the connector. Now, UiPath and Blue Prism, for example, have really excellent APIs available to use and interact with. So it's certainly possible. At this point in time, I'm not aware of connectors that have been released. So it might be something back to you, Royston, to comment on whether there's anything under development or not. But I can say that Sriraj and I have looked at the APIs that you can access via those platforms, and they're very good.
Thank you, Nick. Since I didn't display the safe harbor statement earlier, I will say that at this time, there are no other connectors available. We had a question around Automation Anywhere. I think there's a good amount of interest in it as a tool and a product. So maybe a question for Sriraj here. Is Anywhere open source, and how easy or difficult was it for you to pick up Automation Anywhere and use it?
It's not an open source product, it's a licensed product, but we have a community edition, which is a scaled down version of the enterprise edition with minimal capability that we can try it. But I don't think it'll work with the connector, because we don't have access to create users and things like that in a community edition. And there are only a limited licenses available in community edition. So you can play around with community edition and deploy bots on your machine and learn Automation Anywhere, but to get the complete capability, maybe we need to use the licensed version.
Thank you. And how about picking it up as a tool in terms of difficulty?
It was easier, because whatever bots I've built are basic bots, but picking it up was easy. There are a lot of documentations and tutorials available online, which you can rely on, and they are all pretty good. Like there are a lot of your Automation Anywhere sponsored videos, which had helped me to gain some knowledge on the tool itself.
Thank you for that. I'm also aware that I believe there's an Automation Anywhere Academy or some sort of learning space as well. So if anyone in the community does want to learn more about Automation Anywhere, there's a lot of
yeah, just like Mulesoft, there is an AI illustrates hashtagged videos on YouTube, which is specifically for tutorials related to Automation Anywhere.
Excellent. Do you have any advice, Sriraj, for Mule developers on whether they should consider upskilling in RPA technologies on top of Mulesoft?
I would say there are two different sets, and we have a set of RPA specific developers. If interested, anyone can take up both, but they are two different skill sets, and they should work in harmony. I would say, like instead of jumping here and there.
Excellent, thank you. This one's a little more of a more technical question. So, deployment ID generated even if the action failed?
Yes, for every deployment, we get back a deployment ID, and we can use that to know the progress of the deployment. Yep, the answer is yes.
We have another question around, can we design a finite state machine using automation anywhere? The yes, can you elaborate?
To be really frank, I am not expert enough to answer that question because I'm not very well versed in automation.
Okay, I can add a little bit on that one. I've had a little bit of experience with automation anywhere myself. I believe you can design bots that have very clear decision trees. I haven't necessarily explored a finite state machine, but it can be quite a lot of the different pathways that a particular process can go, especially if it has error handling as well. But I think this one was from Ramesh. You might have to do your own research around how to implement that. And yeah, that would be more of an automation anywhere capability than a Mulesoft capability. You would obviously leverage the bot once you created an automation anywhere. All right. We have a question around automation anywhere features. Automation anywhere use a predefined JSON schema for its output, or will Mule have to parse the output?
The onboard result is a predefined schema because it's their connector, but we can definitely use the REST calling capability of automation anywhere to call our REST APIs, which have our own schema in it. So it can be done in both ways, where the onboard result does automatically call back to our API upon bot completion or a bot failure. Or in other words, we can say we can design our API and use the REST capability of automation anywhere to call that service to get our own predefined schema.
Great, thank you, Sriraj. And what are some of the common exceptions you would face in the automation anywhere connector?
Some of them that I faced was the device not registered, because sometimes what happens when we trigger a bot, it gets triggered successfully, but the target device may not be online. So that times what happens is it gets deployed, but it may not run because it cannot find the device on which it is to be run. So for that purpose, there is something called as a device pool in automation anywhere, where we can select a device pool which has multiple devices in it. So even if one is not available, it will target the next device on which it can run. And another exception that I've found in connector is related to login. Like it only allows one session of a user. So if we are using Mulesoft user in our APIs and we are going to use Mulesoft itself through our UI somewhere else, once the second user logs in, it will automatically kick out our session from Mulesoft. So it will not allow parallel login. So that is something which you need to see.
Thank you. We have another question around asynchronous web service calls. So the question is, are web service calls supported while we integrate RPA and Mulesoft?
Yeah, should be, because automation anywhere itself is asynchronous. We don't give a synchronous response from that because we cannot say that the bot run will be immediate, and we cannot wait indefinite time to get back the result. So what we get back is the deployment ID, and later point of time it completes the run from a different machine and calls back the Mulesoft to pass the result. So the execution itself is asynchronous, and yeah, we can also trigger asynchronous web services from within the bots. If the output doesn't matter for the sequence of steps in the bot, we can definitely call asynchronous web services through bot.
Excellent. Maybe Nick, this might be one that you might be wanting to comment on. Are there use cases or examples you'd want to highlight in terms of potential asynchronous integrations or any other type of integration that would be of interest to the audience?
Oh, look! I think where to begin? I think some of the early industries that we've seen value out of bot use cases have been around finance and insurance. So I've talked around loan origination and cash ordering, for example. But across other industries such as higher education, so student onboarding, for example, with logistics and B2B interaction there, we're seeing some really new and interesting use cases there. So there is certainly, and I would almost suggest, if you're interested in a particular industry, it's a quick Google search away to say, well, what are the top 5 or 10 use cases that I should be considering for RPA for a given industry. There are literally hundreds of good value use cases that you can perform an RPA across industries.
Thank you, Nick. We have a question here around what about the designing reliability and scalability across RPA and bots to legacy systems and the error handling and visibility for end-to-end transactions? So maybe Nick, around how do you design this as an architecture?
Yeah, look, I think, and I pressed this point in when we spoke about those patterns. So there is the potential there to use RPA bots as system API endpoints, and care should certainly be taken as to whether they scale or not. And I would probably caution against that pattern, or use it in very specific scenarios. But where I think that there's the greatest potential here is for bots as consumers of Mulesoft APIs. So where we have bot orchestrations, and those citizen integrators or those designers are considering using Mule APIs to really enhance those bot orchestrations. But yeah, like any process use case that you're looking to design a technical solution for, really take care with those non-functional requirements.
Thank you, Nick. Yeah, I had a couple of comments on that as well. So I've personally been involved in the RPA space a little while ago, and thing that is often missed is that RPA itself has its own life cycle, especially around change management, and many other aspects of an organization, including IT, do not recognize that because it's so new. And so, for example, if you change the UI of a system that is normally used by human beings, there might not be a change management process to say, please update the bot that's consuming this or this terminal screen. And that's where there can be a lot of unexpected failures in the architecture of the organization. So I think about reliability and scalability, it's important to consider what are those points. RPA does really well in systems and processes that don't change frequently, but where there is a lot of frequent change, it becomes something that you have to be on top of to understand how those changes are going to impact the RPA bots, and how you're going to design for resiliency as well. Sriraj, do you have any comments around that you wanted to share?
Yeah, in terms of error handling, the only external ID that connects our transaction with the RPA bots is the deployment ID, which we might have to save it and store it because it's all asynchronous. We do not really know what is happening in the background with respect to RPA. And the only way to get a status from RPA is through the onboard activity or onboard result, which passes the deployment ID back to us with the status of the bot. So it's a deployment ID which is very critical in error handling. And based on that, we can design our mule flow or the error handling capability inside Mule to either retrigger the bot or to completely roll back the previous transaction or the changes made in the other systems. Because there is no way we can do a rollback in UI, because it's all user actions that is being performed in the RPA bot. Unless we create another bot which is capable of deleting and things like that, it's very hard to do rollback in RPA. So it should be the last system in the flow, and based on the deployment ID, we can design our own error handling scenarios. And as you said, reliability is a very big thing here. Because it's all screen scraping and user keyboard actions that we are going to simulate here. And say, for example, we added one more field in the form, it's all gone because it will input name in any other field. So it's very important that we always target a system that has minimal change when we consider RPA.
Yeah, and just one more comment I wanted to add to that is that for when you do introduce RPA into an organization, it can't just be one person who does it. You do need to have people or potentially a team of people who are managing it just like any other technology system. So for example, when there are errors, there needs to be someone who is receiving those errors and able to act on it. You do need RPA developers or developers who have the ability to build RPA bots, but also manage and support them once they go to production as well. So it's more than just one person's laptop for people who haven't interacted with it before.
And the RPA control room has a good auditing. So those who are working on RPA can always log into the control room and see what happened with the bot, and they can actually take up from there. If there is any failure that in between happened, they can actually fix it and resume from there. So there are capabilities in automation that allows to resume the bot. But again, as you said, there should be a specific skill set of people working on RPA who should be monitoring all the bots and taking actions on it.
Excellent. Thank you. It looks like we're done with questions from our audience today. So thank you guys for answering all the questions so patiently. It looks like I think we might be able to end. So with that, Nick, Sriraj, thank you very much for taking the time to prepare and present and answer all the questions we had today. It was a pleasure to have you on the Mulesoft Online Meetup. To our audience, thank you very much for joining us today. In case you missed my earlier message, we will be posting a recording and the slides to the event page within 24 hours. So feel free to revisit the presentation. Our next event should be in a fortnight or so. So please keep an eye out on the online group for an announcement when our next meetup is coming up. Please submit feedback. I will be sharing that with Nick and Sriraj. So if you have words of praise or anything that could be improved for next time, it's always appreciated. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day and stay safe. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Royston. Thanks, everyone. Bye.